This Impact Wrestling review was brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Try it, and the next time a babyface wants to make a point to the authority figure, they won't do it by committing a home invasion. Well, that was certainly more interesting than last week. TNA really needed to do something here. Slammiversary is not far off, there's no buzz for it, and the ratings since Eric Young won the world title have been downright depressing. So it seems like there's a lot riding on this MVP heel turn to generate some interest. I'm kinda skeptical that it'll work, but at least they're trying. MVP is better as a heel than a face, always has been. In that sense, this is a change for the better. And a lot of the stuff he's done since lockdown probably makes more sense now, but there's something I don't understand here. He says that his plan was to set up Eric Young as some kind of patsy champion who, I guess he thinks would be easy to take the belt off of. For now, let's disregard the question of why he thinks defeating EY, who has proven himself to be a gutsy fighting champion if nothing else, will somehow be easier than defeating the former paper champion Magnus, who, when he had the title, was portrayed as a guy who couldn't win a match on his own if you put a gun to his head. What I'm wondering is that if it was always MVP's plan to put the world title on Eric so he could take it from Eric, then why was he so hesitant to put Eric in the world title match a few weeks ago? Why did Eric have to convince MVP to put him in the match when MVP was acting like he didn't think Eric had earned it yet? Shouldn't MVP have been eager to put Eric in a world title match? There's a couple of details that are not adding up here. Plot hole! TNA wasted no time in going into hard sell mode with EY versus MVP this week. I guess they had to. But in doing so, they kind of shined a light on a lot of the problems with this whole situation. Of course, Eric would be pissed off about MVP tricking him, but it felt like they went from 0 to 100 here awfully fast. Eric Young as a serious character and a top guy is still pretty new. We're really not that far removed from the time when he was still the funny guy mid-carder, and this huge transition that he's made, dropping the comedy stuff, becoming more serious, becoming world champion, happened very quickly. We've had very little time for this to sink in, so when you have Eric acting like an enraged badass, like he wants to beat MVP to a bloody pulp, when I thought we were still supposed to be viewing Eric as kind of an underdog champion, I don't really buy that. It just doesn't ring true to me. And suddenly Eric and MVP are fighting all over the building and having pull-apart brawls and all this stuff, and none of this was poorly done, but it all just escalated so damn quickly. Aren't we skipping a few steps here? I mean, the brawl was fine. It just didn't feel like they'd really earned it yet. I think if MVP had turned heel sooner and they'd built up to this more, it might have felt more appropriate. And now that I think about it, I'm not really sure why he didn't just turn on Eric right after Eric won the title in the first place. But maybe there's more explanation coming, who knows. I spent most of this episode kind of hating the Bully Ray Dixie Carter stuff. Bully Ray, the babyface in this feud, mind you, is stalking Dixie Carter at her home, breaking into her house, beating up someone in her house, leaving threats of physical violence on her front lawn. There comes a point where this ceases to be about pro wrestling and becomes a home invasion. These are arrestable offenses, Dixie. You really want to hurt Bully Ray? Call the police, have him thrown in jail, get a restraining order or something. The fact that she didn't just do that, and instead they tried to get this to play out like some kind of low-budget suspense movie, was really hard to swallow. I'm not forgiving any of that stuff. I did like the ending, though. I am on board with a Bully Ray EC3 feud. The potential promos alone that we could get from those two make me excited for this. And even though this does seem like it's being done mostly so Bully Ray can get over on Dixie without actually getting over on Dixie, I do like the idea of this feud a lot. Besides, if anyone out there is seriously crossing their fingers that Dixie Carter is actually going to get put through a table for realsies before this feud is over, you probably shouldn't get your hopes up.
Oh, you were not aware of this?
After just a few weeks, I'm already finding Magnus' storyline with this Bram character far more intriguing and potentially beneficial to Magnus than his world title reign turned out to be. And I'm not even sure if Bram is meant to be a partner or an opponent yet, so they must be doing something right here. They have this match with Willow, where Bram seems a lot more brutish and more concerned with just hurting Willow, whereas Magnus is trying to win the match, and them getting their wires crossed leads to them losing the match. I think it's dumb to have Bram be on the losing end of his first match in the company, in a handicap match no less, but I appreciate the story they're trying to tell here, with Magnus needing to get more vicious until they get on the same page. I just hope it leads to wins for Magnus and Bram sooner than later.
Yes!
The one thing I liked about this knockout segment was Gail Kim basically pissing on that evening gown match nonsense from last week. That crap is not what the knockout division is supposed to be about, and it makes sense that Gail would be offended by that stuff. I guess the point is that we were supposed to be pissed about it too, and I was, but probably not for the reasons the writers intended. It doesn't make me want to boo the beautiful people, it just makes me irritated that they're even on my TV. So Gail has a match with Velvet, and sure enough, Velvet puts the paper bag on Gail's head because they're still not tired of beating that horse to death. Gail wins, of course, the beautiful people beat her down, and I really didn't give a rat's ass about any of this. Gail Kim versus the beautiful people was interesting in 2008, but now, who cares? They're just doing a watered-down version of what they did back then. Give them new stuff to do. Give Brittany a bigger role. Do something different. Because I haven't seen one single thing from the beautiful people so far that justifies bringing this gimmick back. Quite frankly, it's all just felt like a big waste of time to me.
Oh, my brother! Testify!
Well, speaking of different, TNA certainly are trying hard to get the menagerie over. They're trying some different stuff here, lighting the ring differently, playing their music over their matches now. Points for effort, I guess. It's just not clicking with me yet. The lighting, I'll grant you. It didn't work for Sin Cara, but it's harmless enough. But if you want to loop their theme song during their matches, for God's sake, give them a better theme song. Because this got really annoying really quickly. And that's not even counting the match between Kazarian and Crazy Steve.
He's crazy.
If he's spelling crazy with 2 Z's, then shouldn't it be Crazy Steve? I'm probably thinking about this too much. It's not much of a match, and it ends in a DQ because Crazy Steve is acting like a lunatic. He does have some interesting mannerisms, but that doesn't mean much if they don't translate to effectiveness in the ring, and they didn't here. Kazarian is on his way out of the company. I don't see why you couldn't just have him eat the pin. This just felt like the menagerie acting wacky and goofy for the sake of acting wacky and goofy with no real regard for the end result, which is the kind of thing that has never appealed to me. And why were they so happy about Crazy Steve's loss by disqualification? Isn't the whole point of them being there so they can make money for Nux's Family Carnival? Shouldn't they be trying to win matches?
This is unbelievable. This doesn't make any sense.
This is probably a stupid question, but how exactly did Samuel Shaw get committed to a mental institution? I'm pretty sure Ken Anderson beating him in a wrestling match and shoving him into a psychiatric hospital van wouldn't account for that. If you're suggesting that Anderson would have the legal rights to get Shaw sent to a loony bin in a straitjacket just because he beat him in a committed match, then this is probably the last storyline I want to be talking about right now.
I'd rather get a high colonic with a hot poker.
This X Division triple threat with Sonata, Tigreuno, and Zema Ion was a good match. A little slow at times, but it was good. I like Sonata as the X Division champion. I do. I think TNA are doing a pretty decent job now with packaging him as a guy who's representing his country and the Great Muta and takes a lot of pride in what he does. And I like seeing a Japanese wrestler portrayed that way instead of going the stereotypical route like wrestling companies often do. Also, he's been booked very well so far, let's not discount that. But can we please get this guy an actual feud or a storyline of some kind? Putting him in random matches every couple of weeks is not going to cut it. The matches are great, but if that's all he's really getting, then there's not a lot of reason to care, unfortunately. We got a preview of the Slammiversary main event with Eric Young versus MVP here. but I don't actually remember much of the match because the whole thing took a backseat to what happened at the end. Quick question, if MVP had guys ready to interfere, why wouldn't he just make this a no DQ match? I don't know.
Congratulations, you just renewed your idiot license.
This really came out of left field. Kenny King has been appearing only sporadically since he returned, and he went from wanting to go after Sonata to feuding with MVP to being aligned with MVP. If this was the plan all along, then it seems pretty convoluted, but I do like seeing the King of the Night in a main event storyline, so I'll wait for the explanation for this before I weigh in on it. The Bobby Lashley swerve kind of felt like too much too soon in my opinion, and it didn't make sense either. If MVP had Lashley in his back pocket, why have him come out then when Eric was already finished off and the match was over? Lashley turning had no consequence at that point. Why wouldn't MVP save that for when Lashley surprising everyone would have been a big difference maker? Like costing Eric the world title at Slammiversary, for example. Why not instead focus on the Kenny King swerve right now and tell us what that means before you do this? It just seems like the writers were playing their cards really early here. But it was surprising, I'll give them that. I am interested to see where they go with this. I just hope they find a new spin to put on it, because we just traded one heel authority figure with a faction backing them up to another heel authority figure with a faction backing them up, and all this stuff is starting to feel the same to me. If this is going to turn into another Immortal situation, then count me out. I'm going to give the final segment a thumbs up just because the shock value of it was well played and it did surprise me, but I reserve the right to retract that later if the results aren't promising. The wrestling was okay for the most part this week, minus the menagerie stuff, but the storytelling felt unfocused at certain points and repetitive at others. I'm still waiting for something to make me excited for Slammiversary. There might be potential with this MVP faction, even though I'm pretty burned out on factions these days, but we're going to have to wait and see on that one because it really could go either way right now.